retired industrialist. He and his wife were very kind in organizing VVAW and helping them with their funding support for years.
Back in the 1970, 71, 72 here.
But you are a veteran yourself.
No, my son. No? My son is a
lieutenant in Vietnam.
My son is a friend of this son. Yes, but he is retired.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, how nice
And I was on my way to Dewey Canyon 3, or I thought I was on my way to Dewey Canyon 3, and instead a judge put me in jail, so I didn't get to Dewey Canyon 3. And then I wound up out in California, and that's where I finally hooked up with VVAW out of the San Francisco office. And,
Mike McCain, all those guys. Was it Mike McCain?
Mike Oliver.
No, there was a Marine guy out there. He was involved in the
Jack
chapter.
McCluskey?
Well, not another guy. Jack was a medic. There's another guy, McCain, but anyway.
Him I didn't know.
All right. And when...
Don Rice. Don wasn't from New York, though. He was what the hell was he? He was a Chicagoan or something. Yeah. So that's when I first officially got with VVAW.
And what unit were you in Vietnam?
173rd.
Oh, so you were in the Herd.
Yeah.
And you were in the 173rd, from 66 to 69?
I was...
you did 1 tour, 2 tours?
I did one. 68, 69.
And you were an infantryman in the unit?
Yeah, among other things.
And...
No, I was a company clerk, and then I was a battalion librarian after I refused to go to the field. They made me a battalion librarian.
Battalion librarian.
It was a good job. I had about 1,500 paperbacks. Nobody bothered me. I stayed stoned all day. One of my other jobs was showing movies to the guys when they came in out of the field. But they were a bunch of animals. And they blamed me when the bowl burnt, so I stopped showing it to them. And I just used to show it to the guys from my platoon and project it. And you put 16 millimeter and you make it this big, and you got clarity like you wouldn't believe.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Now, were there guys in your unit? Were there guys in your unit?
What is that for? It's a dissertation on the anti-war movement and focusing on GIs and veterans. Richard Moser.
Yeah, beat up the photographer. Yeah.
But I was able to just do I got some stuff on the chapter. I'm almost done with my work. That guy's looking at it right over there. I finally got a manuscript copy.
Oh, is that?
Now it all presentation, guys. So just about finished, and hoping to be able to now chase down a publisher in the next year or two and actually get the thing out. So I'll take a look at one of the copies. I'll be sending a copy to Milwaukee and one to Chicago, so you guys can take a look at it. There's a lot of oral history, and I've used all your words and ideas, and so it's finally coming. And there really is an emerging body of scholarship. This guy's also doing a dissertation on a similar topic. So a lot of people like myself, are really
Your drink, I believe.
Develop this material. And I'm relieved that after 5 years I finally got sort of to the end. So,
God, that's incredible.
long time.
Oh, far out. Yeah.
So, and I ended up with a real nice piece on Dewey Canyon, you know, in part with your some of your words. So, you take a look at it. I'll show you some pieces.
I am. I don't drink.
Him meant so much to me because I knew he meant it. You know, people say shit to you sometimes and you could totally just scream. But he wrote me, I still have the letter. It was just so great. No, he's meant a lot. And Rick was also my friend. I mean, you know, he's my friend. I just haven't seen him in a long time. I haven't. But it was, but I just want to let you know because it's got to be, I mean, it's a lot for you. I mean, you know, you don't have to say anything. I'm just telling you my impression of it. That, and you let him be himself, which is very hard.
It is. It's hard. But I have my own sense. And I do something that is totally unrelated to Southeast Asia in its entirety. My love and my passion is in the Middle East. And here in the United States with the atrocities and the brutalities towards the African American and the Latino. So that's what I do to have the same kind of passion that Bobby has for Southeast Asia would destroy us both. And I mean, my heart is in Vietnam too and Cambodia, but I have to sort of get away from it once in a while. I see it through him, but I have to.
Maybe it was. No, Jack was at the last convention.
I'm done. As soon as I looked, and when we were all young and dumb, now we're old and wise, I guess.
What kind of feeling do you get?
No, after what's happened in the last couple of, from the Gulf War on to the Rodney King verdict, I don't feel too good about a lot of things. I think like we haven't learned too much, or we have learned a lot, but America in general hasn't learned a lot. I think we've just gone through a mini 60s all over again. It's kind of sad. Good people, good organization, people really out there, not drift. A lot of people drifted in and out, of course. I mean, from looking at like Dewey Canyon when there were thousands of people throwing their medals at the wall, but I don't know. Yeah, it's like a lot of nostalgia. Well, it ain't fun getting old. I don't know. Sometimes as a veteran, as somebody that went to Vietnam War, a lot of times I look at the mirror and I see 25 years have passed. And a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things haven't changed. A lot of things are still the same. And even within myself, sometimes I think it's still 1968 or 1969.
Tired of Croatia, Mexico. surfing is very good. Uh-oh, you're zeroing in on the madam here. Keep talking about Costa Rica. And he divided up into lots, about matter of fact, 600 lots. Quarter of an acre to 4 acres type of thing. Buy whatever you want. And he had about, we bought a very fine hilltop overlooking the Pacific Ocean scene, right? And right.
Get it for peace.
The whole thing, yeah.
Most of them. It's a great organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember that?
No, I see a mic on church in the church. I chose the church way back when, during the war. Okay, I chose the church as being more likely to affect changes for the peace. And I've had the time to find out I was wrong. The veterans groups have done more for peace, I think, than most of the churches have.
So during the Vietnam War, you hooked up with
The church.
with the church, and then at what point did you get involved with Veterans for Peace?
Oh, maybe 5-6 years ago. I was in the freeze movement for a long time, and then I saw an advertisement saying Veterans for Peace are working for the freeze. I said, oh, good, I get a chance to use both my interests, working for peace, which I did, and here I am, down here. I've also worked with the Vietnam vets, because I like, we're comrades in arms, so to speak. We have the same goals, and it's been a very good association with them, and
Give me a K. What's that spell? What's that spell? What's that spell? What's that spell? Come on, all of you big strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam. Way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books, pick up a gun. Gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why we're all gonna die. Come on, Wall Street, don't be slow. Why, man, this is war a go-go. There's plenty good money to be made. Supplying the army with the tools of the trade. Just up and pray if they drop the bomb. They drop it on the Viet Cong. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why we're all gonna die. Now come on, generals, let's move fast. Your big chance is here at last. Now you can't go out and get those reds. Only good commie is one that's dead. You know that peace can only be won when they're gonna all the kingdom come. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why we're all gonna die. Now come on, mothers throughout the land. Pack your boys off to Vietnam. Come on, fathers, don't hesitate. Send your daughters off before it's too late. Be the first one on your block to have your kids come home in a box. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why we're all gonna die. La da 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 da. Yeah-ho! Happy birthday! Woo!
Is Father Berrigan here? Okay, we're going to move on. This first person, probably VVAW wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for him. I first met him at the Winter Soldier investigation, where he had a little bit more hair, and afterwards he said he would give me a ride to Ohio, but I had to drive. He didn't know I had never driven in the snow before. We went into a tailspin, and he said to me, "Wow, you handled that really great." My teeth were grinding. My asshole was puckered. I didn't have the slightest idea what I was doing. But luckily I froze on the frozen road, and so times continued on. The first person is, I think, very important and special to VVAW, and Jan Berry.
We're supposed to do 25 toasts, and I'm going to have to ask if we have not only designated drivers, but designated walkers, if you're going to drink all 25 of them in alcohol. I want to toast all of the people who made VVAW possible over all of these years. The people in VVAW and the people in other organizations who helped this organization to be founded and to grow, first in New York and across the country, and ultimately internationally. Someone said to me the other day, "These are my children, what an unruly crew." I have greetings from Carl Rogers, who could not make it from California, and sends his regards. And instead of Dave Brahm is here, he still owes those slides that he borrowed from 25 years ago. I hear that Al Hubbard is still alive and well and living in New Mexico. And I particularly want to thank the crew that put today together. Ed D'Amato, Steve Geiger, Mike Gold, Ann Hirschman, Dennis Lund, Boyd Maston, Brian Matarese, Terry Seltzer, June Flitzlowski, Barbara Webster, and especially Lori Sandow. This is your first toast to all of you and all of our friends. Thank you. Salud.
The next person is a special friend of VVAW, who's been on the highways and the byways, from going through the South with VVAW in 1972 to helping to make the very first banner that VVAW ever had. Our next person, Abe Weisberg.
I have 3 minutes, and I'm unhappy to inform you that I wet my pants before going on when I spilled some wine. I lift my glass. I lift my glass to honor the VVAW, with whom I have had the privilege of being associated closely in the struggles for peace, justice, and a better world since its birth. You want a little louder? Is that enough? Okay. History for all times will note the militant actions of the VVAW at Dewey Canyon 2 and taking over the Statue of Liberty. This made history throughout the world. I wish to note that the VVAW, which played an important role in forcing the United States to end its criminal war in Vietnam against Vietnam and the Vietnamese people, has matured to the point where they are one of the important anti-imperialist organizations in the country. I wish that you would all lift your glass with me to wish the VVAW and its members good health and well-being in the knowledge that they will celebrate their 50th anniversary on 2017. Thank you.
Excuse me, may I have your attention? Okay. My name is Ed D'Amato, and and as I'm not very good at this, so bear with me. I was always better at doing binds us all together is our common experience of being in Vietnam, in the service. Today we're very, very proud to have the permanent representative of Vietnam to the United Nations, Ambassador Nguyen Khan. Nguyen.
Thank you very much. I have prepared a speech, but I would like to, to give it up, because because in such a friendly atmosphere, I would like also to be very informal with you. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to the organizing committee of the 25th anniversary of the VVA for Peace. We know quite well that during the past 25 years, the VVA for Peace has made every effort, not only against the war, but at the same time for peace, for justice, and for the veterans. And in the relationship with Vietnam during the past 25 years, the VVA for Peace against the war has always fought against the Vietnamese war, the American war in Vietnam. And we have to say that thanks to your struggle, your fight, who have contributed quite a lot to the shortening of that atrocious war. I can assure you that the Vietnamese people are very grateful to you for your noble fighting against the war in Vietnam and for peace in Vietnam. By doing so, you have contributed very greatly to the alleviation of the sufferings of the Vietnamese people during the war. On behalf of the Vietnamese people and the Vietnamese government also, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to express to you my profound gratitude. I also understand that during the past 17 years, since the end of the war in Vietnam, you have done quite a lot for the better understanding between the two peoples, for the improvement of relations between the two countries, and of course, especially for the normalization of relations between the two countries. We are very thankful to you. Today, it is a great pleasure for me to have the chance to meet with old friends, Vietnam veterans, whom I have met for quite many times since I arrived to New York, and also to make acquaintance with new friends. I'm deeply moved to be here today to attend your 25th anniversary of the Vietnam Veteran Organization Against the War. I could assure you that the Vietnamese people always regard the American people as their friends. And I can also assure you that they always consider you as their friends. Today, we have here a Vietnamese veteran. He was a soldier in South Vietnam. He fought during the war in Vietnam. And now he is a professor of English in a university in Hanoi. Coincidentally, he's here today and take part to your celebration. We are very pleased to have him here today. It is a mix-up of American Vietnam veterans and Vietnamese veterans also. That's a very good event and a very good augur. As far as the relations between the two countries is concerned, since I arrived to New York, as ambassador and permanent representative of Vietnam to the United Nations, I have been following, and not only following, but having some contribution to the improvement of relations between the two countries. It is, I may say, fortunate that the relations between our two countries are improving and on the way to be normalized, especially after the signing of the peace agreement on Cambodia. We have had formal talks between the two countries. Quite a lot has been done in the resolution of pending issues of the two countries, issues left by the war, for especially the MIA issue. Recently, I may say, just last Tuesday, we had a meeting in Washington with the State Department and also with the Defense Department. Both it is very good to hear it because, as you know, the war ended 17 years ago, and it is now time for reconciliation. It is now time for letting bygones be bygones. It is now time for establishing relations of friendship and cooperation between the two countries, and especially between the two peoples. For us, we wish earnestly that the relations between our two countries could be normalized as soon as possible. I believe that that is for the benefits of the two countries, of the two peoples. The process or the progress made so far, according to the Vietnamese side, is still slow. We would like to push it up, and we would like to have it as soon as possible. In pushing, in the promotion of that process, we believe that Vietnam veterans in the United States has a very important role. We wish you to continue to contribute to the promotion of that process. I would like to take this opportunity to say some few words about the MIA issue, because I understand that you are very much concerned and instrumental not only to one side but to both sides. We will try our best to push up that process. We hope that you would help us. Thank you very much.
We thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for a wonderful speech and for being here with us on this anniversary. I think for each of us in this room who's been in Vietnam, we've left a little piece of our heart there.
And I would like to give you a little piece of our organization. It's the Vietnam Veterans Against the War button. In gratitude for you coming. Can I put it in?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
We're really lucky today, not only... No, not yet. We're real lucky today to have probably one of the most respected people in the Vietnam vets movement in this country. VVAW knew that Agent Orange was killing Vietnamese. And in fact, in 1971, we had demonstrations against its use in Vietnam and the rest of Indochina. What we didn't know was that same dioxin-based defoliant was killing Vietnam vets. In Chicago, a woman who was unafraid to look into the reality of the poisoning of Vietnam vets stood up against the bureaucracy, stood up against the government, got the very first case of Agent Orange disability through the VA. Her reward was, of course, to be fired by the Veterans Administration because it doesn't serve the needs of vets, but the needs of bureaucrats. Our next speaker, Maud DeVictor. Annie?
Before Maud talks to you folks, I have a little presentation. The VVAW Couples Tour in December of 1991 visited Tuzo Hospital in Ho Chi Minh City. That's the Women and Children's Hospital, where they see many, many Agent Orange affected women and children. As we toured the hospital, walking through hallways crowded with patients, a young Vietnamese girl, 5 or 6 years old, walked up to us and handed us a flower as a symbol of the common struggle between the people of Vietnam and Vietnam Veterans of America against Agent Orange. We have framed the flower and we present it to Maud DeVictor with our respect and our love. Maudie.
It's okay. Thank you so very much, VVAW. I'm sort of like taking a gas, I guess, but I really, really appreciate being here with you, and I will always, always cherish this gift. Thank you so much. Okay, give yourselves a hand. And I know I'm scheduled to give a toast, and I'm prepared to do that. But before I do that, I would like to tell you something about my experiences with VVAW. And they don't know I'm going to say this. When I was fired from the Veterans Administration, after 23 years of faithful service, working in various levels of the government, literally told on Friday that Tuesday would be my last day only because Monday was a holiday. Left without any means of support, literally. I now would like to publicly thank VVAW for bringing food to my home, for being with me when I didn't know to jump out the window today or wait until the evening. Many of you might introduce me to other people as Maud DeVictor, mother of Agent O, and she lost her job. But it was VVAW, specifically Chicago chapter, that was there when Bill Curtis wasn't there, that was there when NBC wasn't there, that was there when my college alumni group was not there. And from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of my ancestors, my parents, my dad who's dead, my mom who has Alzheimer's, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for protecting their child. I humbly thank you. I now will go into what I was asked to do, being the good veteran that I am. My toast is a little different, but hopefully it will convey the meaning and the passion that I personally feel toward VVAW. I thank you for being the STP, for giving those of us the racer's edge, for giving us the courage, for representing yourselves and doing things that even if others didn't do it, you did it. I thank you for being the Adolf meat tenderizer in the VA's ass. That's my best line. Down here from there. I thank you for serving as an example of the real reason why this country is here, and no matter how the tides of political trends may ebb and flow, people such as the VVAW and its organization are the reason why, quote unquote, we had that element of greatness. And in the first 4 words of one of, I won't say it's a top 10 song, but we all know the words. And that's the Star Spangled Banner, the first 4 words, which is, "Oh, say, can you see?" And on behalf of my entire life and being, I want to thank you for seeing. I want to thank you for telling others the beauty and the power of being able to see. And I want to congratulate you for continuing to see as you've been harassed and persecuted, and really appreciate the fact that you're now teaching others to see. So thank you, one and all.
My job is to hug all the toasters. I just want, as people are aware, there's a line for food. We started serving the food. Danny Friedman's on the line, so anybody behind him, you're lucky if you get anything. I'd just like to say that for people that haven't gotten their food yet, please wait till the line bakes. Thank you. But please wait till the line gets a little shorter before we get up, so at least when speakers are looking out, they see people in front of them and not to the side. Okay? Thank you.
VVAW has always been made up of more than just veterans. Friends and family members haven't contributed, they've made VVAW. Not everybody in leadership is a vet, and that's probably one of the reasons that we're stronger than we would be. We don't recognize auxiliaries, we recognize leadership. One of the strongest women in Vietnam Vets Against the War, for as long as I know it, has been from Milwaukee. She's never let anything stop her. And the next person, Ann Bailey.
You've heard enough from me today, so this is going to be short and sweet. A toast to all the G2 office pogues who kept track of all those names and addresses and phone numbers before there were computers. A toast. Here's looking up your old address.
Our next speaker is a person that I've known since about 1973, I believe, or 74, maybe 75. He's a special person to me. He was a member of the Union of American Exiles in Britain. He was a war resister. He went let's hear it. He went to England and stayed there. We made contact with his organization. I met some of the people from that group. Subsequently, this person was instrumental in starting the first international chapter of VVAW in London. He's a war resister. He's a former nominee for the Democratic nomination as vice president, and he got 13 votes, I believe, at the convention. It's Fritz Seefaw. I'm not going to hug Fritz.
Okay. I want to say something about a man that I think a lot of you people haven't heard of. Very few people. His name is Harry Pincus. Harry was one of the founders of the Union of American Exiles in Britain in 1967, about the same time that VVAW was being founded here. And UAB, as Eddie said, later on became the London chapter of the VVAW. When that happened, for me and for all of us in London, that was a very important moment. We were exiles and feeling isolated in lots of ways, and the contact, the solidarity that we got from veterans in the U.S. was something that was really important to us. It was a very strong feeling of being together and being accepted into a group of people in our own country that we had a lot of respect for. That was a really important thing to us, and I think that from then on it set a real tone of solidarity that I think you knew all about anyway, because we were working in the anti-war movement all along. Harry Pincus wasn't there when that happened. Harry died tragically in 1970. Harry wasn't somebody he was hard to work with, and he was hard to get along with. But he really struggled at what he did. But he's somebody that I'm not trying to remember him because he was a hero. He wasn't. And he wasn't a hero and he wasn't a villain. And I think that's something I would say about just about all of us. We really weren't heroes that in those times, and we weren't villains either. What we were is that we were people that the war touched our lives, and he was one of us in that. He's one of the people that didn't make it through the war in the end, and I think that's another thing we can look back in our past, and there's what we are really today are survivors. There are a lot of us that died in the time of the war, since the war, and we're the ones that made it through that. It's a small difference, but Harry was somebody that was one of us at one time, and he's somebody that I wanted to remember today, because I think he's not somebody anybody knows of really, but he was somebody that was important at one time, and remembering people like that along the way is an important thing to do. That's being here at a time like this is something where I feel like remembering the commitment that those people had, and renewing the commitment that we make to the struggle that goes on into the future. Thank you very much.
Our next toaster is a woman that I've known since March of 1973. I first met her at the founding conference of the National Council for Universal and Unconditional Amnesty. She's a tireless worker for war resistors. She's a tireless worker for peace and justice. She's also a Gold Star.
Screams. Probably it is no surprise to you here that the vet was Ron Kovic, and Oliver Stone's great movie, Born on the 4th of July, ends with Tom Cruise as Ron wheeling himself out onto the convention podium. It was like he was going to heaven. The draft resistor was Fritz Efall, who you've just heard, Fritz. And the Gold Star mother, of course, was me. But why do I mention this when we are here celebrating the anniversary of VVAW? This is very important, so please listen carefully. For quite a few years, there was considerable conflict between draft resistors and veterans. The vets claimed that the draft resistors and the peace movement called them baby killers, and the draft resistors felt that the vets thought of them as cowards. It was essential that there be healing between these two factions and bridges built between them. VVAW to the rescue. Finally, in large part due to their efforts, we were all able to understand that draft resistors, military resistors and deserters, and vets with less than honorable discharges were all victims together of the many injustices inherent in that war. And we demanded amnesty equally for all of them. We were able to say that draft resistors could imagine the immorality of the Vietnam War. Veterans had to experience it. So I salute VVAW for your central role in bringing about the almost unconditional amnesty we sought, and above all, for the understanding you fostered that peaceniks and veterans could work together for the prevention of future wars. We've still got plenty to do. I give you VVAW.
First of all, I would like to ask people to be a little quieter. There's some people have told us that they better away. She's truly, along with her colleagues, a pioneer in this country. She is a psychologist, and she is one of the founders whatever the word is, of the post-traumatic stress syndrome. She's truly a wonderful woman. I'd like to introduce Dr. Florence Pincus.
Can you hear me? Okay. When we met in 71, over 20 years ago, I didn't need help going up those steps. I wasn't feeling so breathless. Today, 20 years have passed, 25 years with the VVAW, and my toast, I have other personal recollections. I will not take the time today, perhaps tomorrow. I don't want to take the time. However, I do want to say that I feel the most pride, admiration, privilege, having worked early on with the VVAW. The VVAW is the only veterans organization I know of that has stayed the course. Not only that has been opposed to war, and there was a brief period after World War II. That organization lasted very briefly. This has lasted 25 years with all the trials, tribulations, police hunts, surveillance. We had FBI agents coming in our group, posing police cordons when the Statue of Liberty was taken, and when the guys took the Statue of Liberty over, you had to pass a police cordon to get up there. And these things were going on and on and on. VVAW has stayed the course. Most progressive organizations do not last this long. And I know, I have watched them survive for 8, maybe 9 years, and then they can't survive. VVAW somehow has done it and is continuing to do it, and just look at this turnout. When we had things going on, we didn't have men and women together. And today you heard from a North Vietnamese, we have grown so much, and VVAW, with not enough recognition, has done this. And I want to tell you that I will never forget the privilege that I have had, and will continue doing whatever I can. See you tomorrow.
The United States is really no shirker when it comes to committing crimes, whether it was the question of the slaughter of the Native American people, the enslavement of Afro-Americans, or the destruction of Cambodia. to claim the fame of 12 years of Republican rule has been to vote for the Khmer Rouge to be seated in the United Nations, despite the fact that they are one of the worst genocidal groups around today. VVAW is very proud to have an update on the problems and situations in Cambodia today. Chen Tu Bui from the Committee to Oppose the Return of the Khmer Rouge.
Things haven't been too good in Cambodia for a long time now. But the worst thing is that the future doesn't look too good either. As you might have heard, in October last year, 19 nations signed the United Nations Agreement on Cambodia in Paris. It's an agreement between the 4 contending factions, including the Khmer Rouge. The agreement calls for elections to be held in 1993, once all the armies of the factions have been disarmed, to ensure a democratic election. Democracy, as you know, is a very beautiful word. But the fact is, if everything goes well until the election time, this is Cambodia's first democratic election. The reality is that Cambodia is a poor country. Democracy cannot take root among people with empty stomach. For the last 13 years, Cambodia has been denied United Nations development aid and has been the target of a US-led economic and trade embargo. This contributes enormously to the poverty of the Cambodian people, which consists of 60% women, and 50% of the population is under the age of 17. In such unstable economic, political, and military environment, a democratic election is an ambitious task. To date, a United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia has been set up. Approximately 10,000 United Nations troops and about 500 civil administrators have arrived in Cambodia. The tasks of the civil administrators are to organize elections, facilitate repatriation of the 300,000 refugees from the Thai border. The United Nations troops, however, have the biggest task of all. They are to supervise the ceasefire and to disarm all the armies of the factions before the election date. So far, the United Nations troops have been unsuccessful in stopping the Khmer Rouge from attacking Cambodian villages. Despite the truce, the Khmer Rouge attacks on villages have escalated this year, and the United Nations seems at a loss as to how to respond. Recently, there have been strong words exchanged between the United Nations chief and the Khmer Rouge. Perhaps the task of stopping the Khmer Rouge from attacking Cambodian villages and of disarming the Khmer Rouge are beyond the United Nations capacity. This reality calls into question as to whether the Cambodian people will be able to survive this peace agreement. Thank you.
Respect comes in many words, and one of the ways you can show respect is to either talk very softly or not talk at all. And why do I raise that? Because the people that are speaking, one, have something to say, and two, because we're just polite Vietnam vets. We're very lucky today to have a whole number of people here who are not going to speak, but are certainly representatives of very important struggles. One of those is, unfortunately, I was trained in the United States schools, which means I can't even pronounce my own name. For 20 years, I couldn't say Romo correctly. So when I mispronounce names, please excuse me and realize that the U.S. system doesn't know how to teach people to spell or pronounce. We have Jaime Hermanda, who was the ex-minister, counselor of Nicaragua to the United Nations, former director of communications of the Sandinista Front, and presently head of news programming for the Sandinista Front. VVAW is very proud to have him here and sent delegations on a yearly basis in support of the Nicaraguan revolution. How do you introduce someone who's larger than life, or at least larger than you are? One of the things that's real nice about introducing people is you get to smooth up here. And the next person I've learned a lot from, one of the best speakers I've heard in a while, Greg Payton from the New Jersey chapter of Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
Well, I'm at the podium again. When I was a young man, just prior to me going to Vietnam and getting drafted, we used to hang around on the corners and we used to sing doo-wops. I know none of you people here heard about doo-wops. I know nobody in there knows anything about doo-wops. But one of the things that I found out is that we used to have daily toasts, and we used to always remember those that weren't with us. And tonight, this evening, I'd like to make a toast to the brothers and sisters that have struggled with us through the years, that are not with us here tonight. And what I found out later on is that this has been an old, ancient African custom of libation. So I just want to pour my toast into a cup. I normally would pour it in the ground, for our ancestors and for those that came before us, and that we still remember them in our minds and in our hearts, and we still carry on to the tradition of VVAW. A luta continua, the struggle still continues, and here's the libation for the brothers and sisters that are not here tonight. All right.
Probably comes as a surprise to most of you, but VVAW hasn't always been correct. One of the things about being a young person who first buys the line that imperialism is fine and we should fight in Indochina is that when all of a sudden you discover that the war is wrong, that doesn't mean that you discover the correct way to change America. VVAW went through a lot of changes. We made a lot of mistakes. But those mistakes weren't based upon the fact that we thought we could get a good job or good retirement. Those mistakes were based upon the fact that we wanted the place to get better. We wanted the war to end. We wanted people to eat. One of the people who throughout, at least my experience in the movement, has been a guiding light and a friend indeed, is a person that's you're all going to recognize, Mr. Dave Dillinger.
There's so many wonderful people here, and I have been so inspired that I think I have to tell you the old joke about the Quaker and his wife. Joe Bangard. The Quaker said to his wife, honey, I hate to report it, but nobody is perfect except you and me. And sometimes I wonder a little about you. So, despite all the perfection and inspiration here, I have to quote Albert Camus, who said, hold your hats. This is what he said: beware of all veterans. And I know, as you know, that he meant anti-war veterans as well as other veterans. And why? Because whatever you and I have learned, we also tend to be a little biased, a little scarred by it. And what happens is a new generation comes along with a perspective and insights, hi Dave, which you and I don't. And therefore my toast is a toast to the VVAW for having been the cutting edge of the anti-war movement, and a toast to the VVAW. May it continue to be the cutting edge by listening to the young people of the country and the new people who have been newly aroused. A toast.
But the next person's poetry is not only deeply moving, but also speaks to real experience and real political change. VVAW is very proud to have W.D. Earhart for our Cultural Center.
Thank you. I'm going to keep this short, although I'm supposed to get 6 minutes. Linda Vandevenner called me Thursday night. She had surgery on her foot last week, and it has not healed as quickly as she would have liked it to, so she is not here today. She asked me to give a toast for her, but if you will excuse me, I'm just going to incorporate that into what I do because we're already pushing the clock here. This is a poem called The Invasion of Grenada, although you could call it The Invasion of Panama or The Invasion of Kuwait or whatever you like. They all work pretty well. I didn't want a monument, not even one as sober as that vast black wall of broken lives. I didn't want a postage stamp. I didn't want a road beside the Delaware River with a sign proclaiming Vietnam Veterans Memorial Highway. What I wanted was a simple recognition of the limits of our power as a nation to inflict our will on others. What I wanted was an understanding that the world is neither black and white nor ours. What I wanted was an end to monuments. Ladies and gentlemen, here's to an end to monuments.
Our next toaster is somebody I've known for a long time. I met her in Denver, in some house in Denver. God knows what we were smoking. I'm joking. I never inhaled. She's a good friend. She's a tireless worker for peace and justice. She organizes in unions. She's a nice woman. And she's also the widow of a dear friend of ours in New York. I'd like to introduce Elena Schwolsky-Fitch.
I must have inhaled because I don't even remember being in Denver. I guess. This is a very bittersweet moment for me, because 5 years ago in Chicago, it was my husband Clarence who stood here and offered a toast. But it's also, the sweetness is still here, and I want to offer this toast in loving memory of Clarence Fitch, who died 2 years ago in May of 1990 after a 3-year battle with AIDS. Clarence was known to many of you as an active member of VVAW and one of the coordinators of the New York, New Jersey chapter, which now bears his name. I'd like to thank the members of that chapter for honoring him and keeping his memory alive in such a special way. And I'd especially like to thank Greg Payton and Dave Klein for keeping me close and always having a shoulder available when I needed it over these last couple of years. Thank you. The work of VVAW that was closest to Clarence's heart was outreach to young people through the program in the schools. He wanted to share the painful experiences and lessons of Vietnam with them in the hope of giving them information he never had when at the age of 18 he enlisted in the Marine Corps and was sent to fight in Vietnam. He was particularly concerned about reaching young African American men and women, and he dedicated himself to fighting the racism and lack of opportunity that pushed them into the military. This past month, as we watched rage and frustration at years of these conditions erupt in city after city in our country, I missed Clarence more than ever. I missed his honesty, I missed his loud, strong opinions, and I missed his refusal to back away from a difficult fight or a difficult issue. Clarence's name will never be engraved on a Vietnam memorial, though he considered himself a casualty of that war. But it is being sewn into a panel for the names quilt, which will be displayed in Washington, D.C. this next October. And at the center of his panel will be the logo from his VVAW t-shirt, because that's how important this organization was in his life, even when he got really pissed off and threatened never to come to another meeting again. With all the love, courage, and strength that Clarence left us, I offer this toast to all veterans seeking recovery from drug and alcohol addiction, and to all veterans living with HIV and AIDS. As VVAW celebrates its 25th anniversary, may we all rededicate ourselves to the fight against racism and for a just and peaceful world. Thank you.
I wasn't a founder of VVAW by any means. I was actually quite late. One of the first people I met in VVAW had hair down to his ass. And when I was told I was going to be able to go on a trip to Vietnam, I cut my hair because I didn't want to embarrass me or them. And this person attacked me, saying that it wasn't right that I cut my hair, that people would just have to learn. Now, no truer words were ever spoken. The next person has been indispensable to VVAW, and I think has exemplified what we stand for. A love for our former enemies, a respect for veterans across the board, and a love for Vietnam vets against the war. Ed D'Amato.
This time I'm going to really take a toast. I inhale. Just everybody knows VVAW has been very important to me all my life. And one of the reasons why is it's because it's given me an opportunity to meet so many wonderful people. And I'm going to just pick out a handful of names of people that I just love, and I haven't seen them in like years and years, and they're here today. Stephen Estelle Rose, Lenny Rotman from Boston, Gail Graham from Buffalo, Jack Smith from Cleveland, I believe, And I could go on and on, but I'm not going to. I also want to thank, the reason why I'm wearing this is because I cooked the carrots today. But I want to thank the people in the kitchen. Listen up. Sierra, Arlene, Marianne, Jane, and the others I'm forgetting. And I want to thank my niece, Donna, who came today to help in the kitchen. Now, there's two other people I think that I'd like to single out. One of them is truly, this is not a joke, but one of them, truly, if this person wasn't here, this event would not have happened. I think we should all thank Laurie Sandow. And the second person is, he gave me a nice introduction, so, you know, quid pro quo, I think it's called. But truly, if it wasn't for Barry Romo, VVAW wouldn't exist today, so I think he deserves to win. And I want to give another presentation, but this one's a little lighthearted. I'd like Coco Crystal to come up to the stage. I don't know if people know Coco Crystal. She's one of the founding members of a group that VVAW used to work with. It was called the Emma Goldman Brigade. And Coco now has her own television show on cable television, which nobody knows where it is. But anyway, I just want to say something that, no, you're going to stay here. I just want to say that the Emma Goldman Brigade, one of their most famous demonstrations was when they went to the National Republican Women's Club, and I think they were giving a salute to Pat Nixon. And Coca and the other members, Jill and whoever else.
10 other brave women.
They went there, and during the course of the luncheon, they released white mice in the dining hall.
Yes, we did.
And just to show you that life is cyclical, this is philosophical now,
Okay.
that life is a cycle.
You're
I want you to know that the meat that was cooked today was cooked in the kitchen of the National Republican Women's Club. And I want to present to Coca one of the dishes from the National Republican Women's Club that I liberated.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks.
We have tickets for the concert tonight, so if you're going to leave early and you aren't going to finish all the toasts, when you leave and you go out the back door, which is the front door, buy your tickets on the way out. Don't get up now, because they'll be there. If you're going to finish the event, wait till the end of the event and buy them, but if you're leaving, pick them up before you do.
So I would like to introduce him. I've known him for so many years. I knew him when I had hair. He was a guy that lived out in Long Island. He was, every time it got too heavy in New York, I used to go out to his apartment in Great Neck, and I'd consider it R&R. Since then, he became the founder of the Vietnam Veterans of America, and he's currently the president of the Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation, my old dear friend, Bob Muller.
We're talking commitment. Let's see you in another 25 years, guys. and gals, brothers and sisters. You know, most of the public related to our organization in terms of our politics, and they knew where we stood on the issue of the war. But what they really didn't understand, what was every bit as important for us as veterans, was the friendship that we got out of this organization and the camaraderie that was shared. Whenever I think of VVAW, as much as I can think about the protests and the marches, quite frankly, I think about Alamucci in 1971, the Mad Hatter and Ed doing an incredible version of Wild Thing by a Fire. So very simply, my toast is to friendship, camaraderie, love, brotherhood, and solidarity. Cheers. And sisterhood.
The next toaster is one of the founders of the peace and justice movement in the United States, at least in the 60s and probably the 50s. She's a woman who, if in 1971 we said, where are we going to run this leaflet off at 3 o'clock in the morning? We would say, Norma Becker. I forgot something. Norma Becker was the one, I believe, according to what Jan told us, that, and along with Abe Weisberg, who made up the first Vietnam Veterans Against the War sign. Yeah. So I think she found a couple of vets. She said, here, carry this. That's how we got our name, Norma Becker.
Now listen, everything that I wanted to say about VVAW has already been said, so I'm going to have to say something different. Just want you to know that in 1964 and 1965, when the civilian anti-Vietnam War movement got started, I'm waiting for you all to be quiet so I can continue. Anyway, we were a pitiful, pathetic, small minority of people going against the tide. We struggled along, and it seemed to us that each time that we increased the numbers of people at a demonstration, doubled the numbers of people at a demonstration, there was a corresponding escalation of the war. This may or may not have been coincidental. In our paranoid minds, it wasn't. At any rate, the point that I'm trying to bring out is that there were many periods during which the anti-war, the civilian anti-war movement was despondent and depressed. And then suddenly, from out of nowhere, in 1967, came VVAW. This was a shot in the arm for the civilian anti-war movement. And I just want to point out that together with VVAW, the civilian anti-war movement, succeeded in creating what in history will be known as the Vietnam War Syndrome, a state that made it politically impossible for the United States to intervene militarily in Nicaragua, El Salvador, or what have you. I toast the VVAW.
Ceremonies tonight, and he has something he wants to read. Country Joe McDonald.
Some of you might know that I sang at the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. this Memorial Day. It was an honor for me to do that. I was very happy. Jan C. Scruggs, the man who built the wall, asked me if I would lay a wreath with Richard Nixon at the wall. And I said that yes, I would. Jan said that his feelings this year on the 10th anniversary was reconciliation and healing. I think that's very important. I didn't think that I agreed with Nixon, but I would lay a wreath with Nixon. Nixon refused to lay that wreath. He never showed up at the wall. I'd like to read something from Lewis Puller, Chesty Puller's son, who is the most highly decorated Marine that ever served in the Marine Corps. His son had both of his legs blown off in the Vietnam War, and I'm reading his autobiography at the moment. It's very good, very intelligent. I had the privilege of meeting him, and I'd like to read to you a little bit of, as I would like to propose a toast to our children, and I would like to, through the words of Lewis Puller Jr., to kind of relive Dewey Canyon 3 and the perspective of someone living very close to Washington, D.C., a Marine, a Vietnam veteran, Lewis Puller Jr., as he watched the events unfold at Dewey Canyon 3 on the radio and on television. And for the sake of some of you who may not exactly remember, as a little bit of verbiage here, but I think you'll enjoy it. The third week in April of that year, more than 1,000 Vietnam veterans gathered in Washington to protest American involvement in the war. On Sunday, April 18, 1971, they began assembling in West Potomac Park, and their activities over the next 5 days reported extensively on national and local television and in newspapers throughout the country became known as Operation Dewey Canyon 3, after two similarly named earlier military operations in Vietnam. I was not a part of the anti-war movement, and indeed thought that many of the motives of its leaders were self-serving and destructive to the country. But as the week wore on and I watched my former comrades give vent to their feelings and frustrations, I was almost persuaded to go to Washington and join them. In the first course of the week, they conducted a ceremony for the war dead near the Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington Cemetery, established a campsite on the Mall, demonstrated at the Pentagon and at the Supreme Court, and staged a candlelight march around the White House. Throughout the week, they lobbied on Capitol Hill for an end to the war. One articulate young combat veteran named John Kerry delivered a moving address before a special session of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that, for me, summed up the sense of betrayal and the disillusionment I felt toward the administration and the leadership that had directed the course of the war from the safety of its Washington power base. On Friday, April 23rd, 1971, in the culmination of the events of the week, the protesting veterans were scheduled to march to the steps of the Capitol and discard their medals in a symbolic gesture of their feeling of having been discarded themselves by the nation. These were many of my brothers, not starry-eyed intellectuals or malcontents dedicated to the overthrow of our form of government, but to soldiers and Marines, many of whom had paid for their perspectives with shattered lives and shattered limbs. They were now saying that their sacrifices had been meaningless, that my sacrifice had been meaningless, and that the precious blood spilled by our dead and maimed fellow veterans had been meaningless. For years, I had been hearing similar rhetoric from anti-war spokesmen whose ideology was foreign to me, but I was now hearing it from those young men whose kinship with me had been forged in the bloody crucible of Vietnam, and its impact, like a fog lifting from a shrouded landscape, stripped me of my remaining self-delusions. On Thursday night, before the climactic last day's events in Washington took place, I took my medals from our bedroom closet and debated whether I should drive to Washington to throw them away. As I sat silently in the dimly lit closet, feeling the weight of the bronze and silver in my hand, and studying the red, white, and blue stripes of my silver star and the majestic cameos of George Washington on my purple hearts, I knew that I could never part with them, that they had cost me too dearly, and though I now saw clearly that the war in which they had been earned was a wasted cause, the medals still represented the dignity and the caliber of my service and those of whom I had served. I could no more discard them than I could repudiate my country, my Marine Corps, or my fellow veterans. As I put them away, I was very sad and very tired, but grateful nonetheless that my children were asleep in their beds in America rather than anywhere else in the world. A toast to our children.
The United States is an incredible place. While the Reagan administration demands family values, we support governments, as in El Salvador, that rape and kill nuns, kill priests, and kill the people to clean their homes. The United States has poured billions of dollars into a neo-fascist or fascist government in El Salvador. We're very honored to have Gustavo Acosta, FMLN representative in the United States from El Salvador, for a short update.
Good evening. It's a great honor for me and the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front of El Salvador to be here tonight with a group of peace warriors. It takes a great deal of courage to go and fight a war when you know why you're fighting it for. But it takes greater courage to oppose any kind of war. The Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front signed a peace agreement with the government of El Salvador early this year. Since then we realized, and even before that, that peace is not just the absence of war, but peace also means the satisfaction of the needs of the Salvadoran people in this case. The roots of the war has not been solved in El Salvador, and we're fighting for peace. And it's just not a matter of having a willingness to peace, because you can ask and you can even beg the hunger to stay calm and not resort to war, but unless their needs are satisfied, that's difficult to ask. A commitment to make peace lasting in El Salvador on the part of the FMLN also depends on the commitment of the Salvadoran government, and in this case, on the commitment of the United States government to fulfill all the aspects of the peace agreement signed early this year. Up to now, hundreds of thousands of Salvadorans are still waiting for some of the changes to take place. Many of fighters, popular fighters, and as well as soldiers of the Salvadoran government are still trying to find out what is the best way to reconcile and to unify a nation that for more than 10 years fight one of the most bitter wars of this hemisphere. We need your help, we need your support, and not because your government was involved in destroying and helping to destroy a country, but because in El Salvador we can show that peace is better than war, that if we come together in a national reconstruction project, other Latin American countries and third world countries that still has the same kind of social, political, and economic problems that we have can follow suit. So we need to make the peaceful settlement of the conflict in El Salvador workable, and your government has a lot to do with it. Thank you very much.
We're really lucky to have some of the very original people of Vietnam Vets Against the War. The next person was the founding vice president in 1967 of Vietnam Veterans Against the War, Shelley Ramsdale.
Head Vice President, no. You all look familiar. What's your name? Oh, I remember you. Yeah. Wow. This is one of the happiest days of my life, and I'm very proud of everybody. Really. I gotta mention what Bobby Mueller said this afternoon at the monument about how in the VA hospital he discovered VVAW and it changed his life and gave him a new reason for living. That reminds me of during the Cambodian incursion in 1971 in New York, we had 7 Vietnam vets wounded at the VA hospital, and they set up a table, a poster, and a petition protesting that. The director, Mr. Shannon of that hospital, threatened to throw them out of the hospital and take their benefits away. Well, one of them, Chris Suarez, called VVAW and said, "Can you help us?" And we went straight over to the hospital. We were going to be thrown out as well. And that night we had him on national public television. But that's my bag, media all the way through. And Chris would go to Dewey Canyon and he would be on his crutches with a great wound hole in his upper leg. And the man, he had a whole new life. And I began to realize at that time what VVAW really meant. It was not just politics, going out raising hell about the war. It was about bringing people home, welcoming them home and giving them some place to be a human being, respected. And it worked, and it's still working. And I live in San Francisco. I can't tell you the numbers of homeless vets there are out there. I haven't noticed here very much, but it's devastating. This war is not over. But I say I want to give a toast now to the women of VVAW and the women that have supported us all the way along. Peggy Carey is here. I met Peggy with VVAW in 1967, and later I found out she had a brother. But anyway, here's to the women. Thank you.
Our next toaster, I hope is still here. I don't see her. We're getting there, we're getting there. Sit down and enjoy it. The first time I walked into a VVAW office was in 1970, and I remember being impressed with a lot of people there. One of them was Al Hubbard, who I'm sorry is not here today. We don't know where he is. Oh, we do know where he is, but we didn't get in touch with him. The other person that I thought was very savoir-faire was John Kerry was in the office. And they were walking around, they would talk on the telephones, and people would call them up and everything. And there was one person in the office who, after like 2 weeks of going in there, I noticed, I said, geez, who's this woman and what's she doing? And I realized the amount of work that she did. And I consider her the mother of VVAW. I believe that because of the organizing work that she did in the office was so key to the success of the early demonstrations that VVAW made including Operation Raw, the Winter Soldier investigation in Detroit, and Dewey Canyon 3. Without her guidance and little prod in the ribs once in a while, none of those things would have happened. And she truly is a great, great friend of VVAW, and I love her very much. Madeline Moore. This is like Madeline, she left. She doesn't want any public recognition. No. Well, thank you, Madeline. I'm sorry you had to leave.
We're working our way down. Don't worry, we'll get there. At the end of the ceremony, people have a cake. And we also save the best for last. One of the things about Vietnam Vets Against the War is that we realized the people we fought in Vietnam were not our enemies. It was the people that sent us there. Over the years, we've been lucky. We've been lucky to meet soldiers and comrades from Vietnam that don't blame us for invading their country. And I think one of the reasons that Vietnam vets have been able to deal with their psychological problems has been with the comradeship that Vietnamese soldiers have shown towards Vietnam veterans. This next person is real special to VVAW, lots of special people. And the reason he is that the people have met him both in the United States and Vietnam. We've had to hold some of our coordinators off who want to whisk him away. But our next speaker, who gave us a lovely gift at the memorial today, Nguyen Nha Con, and I apologize for my pronunciation.
Well, I'd really like to thank everybody for inviting us here. I had intended to offer a toast to the young people that are here. My two teenage young daughters are sitting here going, dinosaurs, you know. Dad, I haven't heard a rap band all day. So it's been a little bit difficult for some of the young people. But Country Joe took care of that. I was in a conversation this morning. I got thinking about the first time I ever stood in front of a high school and tried to tell young people what it was like to be in Vietnam. And the teacher had done it real well. She arranged all of the chairs in a U, and they started on this end. Each student had to have one question for a real live Vietnam veteran. And we went all the way around, and the last person over here was a young girl, and we were running out of time. And she said, she's real shy and quiet. She said, my question is, I have two younger sisters. Both of them have very severe birth defects. And I know my father believes that was caused by Agent Orange. But when he hears the word Vietnam, when the subject comes up, he goes in his room and he closes the door, and sometimes he stays there 2 and 3 and 4 days, and he doesn't come out. And I can't ask him, so I really thank you for coming here. And my question is, what is Agent Orange? Well, if you've never been to a high school and you've never let these kids ask you questions, let me tell you, it's tough. It's tough. And I don't think there's anything that I've ever done in my life that's more worthwhile. I hope that my kids get something out of today. They've heard the truth. It's been exposed to them. Thank God for VVAW for that. I'd like to offer a toast to the mothers and fathers. It isn't easy being a mom and a dad, bringing up kids, telling them the truth with everything that's out there today, finding time to be involved in all the other things in life and still tell the truth and try and bring up your kids to be a little bit different. So mothers and fathers throughout the land, Here's to you. Thanks for the invitation.
They needed help. He's worked extensively on Vietnam vet issues since then, being a prime mover in the New York Memorial, and since then has touched base and touched hearts in meeting with the Afghanzi, the Soviet Union veterans of Afghanistan. Our next toaster, Peter Mahoney.
About 8 months ago, when I first started telling my friends, most of whom were Vietnam veterans, most of whom were in Vietnam Veterans Against the War, that I planned to go to Russia and work there for rubles for a year with Afghanistan veterans, the response was almost universal. First thing they said was, "You gotta be crazy." And then the second thing they said was, "Boy, I wish I could be going." I'd like to offer a toast today to leadership. You know, every once in a while in history, generations come along that, just by the very nature of where they're situated in history, are the generations that are given the responsibility to make change. And that's our generation. You know, we're the first generation to grow up with the power to totally destroy the planet in our hands. So we're the generation that's going to have to make the choice about how we're going to use that power, or else there aren't going to be any other generations to make that choice. And Vietnam veterans, particularly Vietnam veterans against the war, we are the leaders of this generation. You know, it's not something that we chose, it's a responsibility that's been given to us. So here's to our leadership, and let's not shirk our responsibility.
A man who needs no introduction, Nguyen Hong. Hong? Hong? I'm sorry.
Dear brothers and sisters, I bring with me greetings from veterans of Vietnam to VVAW on this honorable 25th anniversary. For the last 25 years, VVAW has been educating many generations of Americans and has been fighting against wars in Vietnam and in other parts of the world. And I take this opportunity to say to you that I thank you for all that you've been doing for Vietnam, and I would like to propose a toast to the 25th anniversary of VVAW. Thank you.
We are very honored to have our next toaster here today. He's a man who's done so much his entire life for peace and justice. He was a defender of people in the civil rights movement, in labor fights. He's like, I'll give you two examples. Somebody told me that in Chicago at a union meeting, a bunch of people, Barry mentioned that he knew this person, and people said, "You know him?" And recently I was at a party and the same thing happened. I mentioned to a woman that I knew him, and she said, "You know him?" He's a lawyer. He's been before the Supreme Court. He's a Supreme Court lawyer, and he's a good friend, and he makes great gin and tonics with mint from his own backyard. Arthur Kanoy.
Well, sisters and brothers, as the 21st person called on to make a toast, I'm about to make movement history. I will not take this microphone as I generally do and speak for an hour. I am going to speak for less than 1 minute. I was asked to give you all a toast, and let us give toasts from the past for the present. There was one toast from the deep struggles of the 1960s when the black people were fighting for their most elementary rights, which at the end of a whole affair like this, the most incredible person who everyone here must remember, Fannie Lou Hamer, the fantastic, brilliant leader of the movements of the people, made a toast which the VVAW today and all of us working against the power structure of this country must remember. And what is that toast? Power to the people!
Believe it or not, we've gone through 24 toasters. We have a cake the size of our next speaker that's coming up. So you probably want to gather your beer and alcohol and 7-Up around you for the last toast. VVAW exists not because there's a national office or regional coordinators or chapter coordinators. It exists because there are individual members. The next person gave 15 years of his life to the national office. He didn't run for re-election, and he hasn't stopped doing any bit of work he did from the day he was a national coordinator to the day he was an ordinary chapter member in Chicago. One of the things about being in leadership and having a good job, like being an auto mechanic or a bus mechanic or a truck mechanic, is that we're able to take your pay and turn it into newspapers. This person not only gave of his time, he gave of his money. I think Bill Davis is really one of the more respected, underrepresented members of VVAW, and I think we should be proud that he's our last toaster as we remember 25 years of struggle.
I'd like to see this cake. Before I launch into this, I'd like to make a brief statement about a dear departed comrade, brother, friend. His name was Michael Carmody. He was one of the founding members of the Kent State chapter. He was a rogue, drunkard, madman, in short, the essence of what this organization was founded on. He died on the West Coast a couple years ago from some unnamed cancer, from some undetermined amount of the chemical cocktails the VA recalls. He was a Fenian, an Irish Republican, a loyal follower, the loyal order of Hibernians, and a spear carrier for that organization over the years. He was a working class kid from a grim, gray, windswept place called North Hill in Akron, Ohio, and one less flower grows there today. We hear so much about the 25 years of this organization. Everyone knows the big demonstrations, the big activities that went on. We talk about all the international trips and the people we've met with and the things that we've accomplished and the things we've yet to do. But some people don't know about some of the day-to-day things that went on in this organization. The number of times we stood up to the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis in this country, and when they wouldn't back down, we kicked their ass. Running convoys of food and ammunition into Cairo, Illinois when it was under siege by the Ku Klux Klan. Little things like this. That's what made this organization, and the people that made this organization, the people that stayed up in the middle of the night cranking out leaflets and then taking those same damn leaflets out in 20 below degree weather and passing them out in front of VA hospitals. Those are the people that made this organization and sustained this organization. There are great things that went on in this organization. Both times we took over the Statue of Liberty. The second time I'm proud to have been present there. We also hold the world record for having occupied the Statue of Liberty for the longest period of time. I salute those brothers in 1971 and 1976. The backbone of this organization when it began, through all the worst periods, until still today, is the women that saved our lives, and in the darkest hours of this organization, saved this organization and lead it forward today. I salute them. I salute all the people who have ever been in the national office of this organization and lived in all the rat holes we've ever been in, washed out, took baths out of the sinks when they lived in the offices, and lived with the organization and stayed with the organization. I salute those people. I salute all the people in struggle around the world who we stood up beside and whose struggles continue. Most of all, I salute all of you here today and toast you for being alive for the last 25 years and looking forward to another 25.
Can see this cake, but it's just absolutely beautiful. It has the insignia of VVAW on it, and I would lift it up and hold it like this, but forget it. It'd be a big mess. I would like to call a few people up to the stage, very few people, to take a bow for the continuing work that they did on this event. And truly, these are the three people that helped make this event. I would like to ask Laurie Sandow to come up. He's not here? I would like to ask Dennis Lund to come up to the stage. Come on. And I would like to ask Boyd Maston to come up on stage. He's got along with Lori, these are the people that did the organizing for this, the main organizing, and they really deserve a round of applause.
Thank you very much. In some ways, this is the story of a little button that turned into a great big party, because a couple months after I came back from Vietnam in 1967, I heard about VVAW. I was on the West Coast. I sent in some money, got a little tiny button in the mail, some information on the organization, and that button sustained me, and it's very nice to see everybody here today and be celebrating 25 years of work together for peace.
So we should all congratulate ourselves on 25 years of hard work, and let's hope we don't have to do it for another 25 years, but if we do, we'll be here. And I want everybody to please enjoy your cake and your 25th anniversary. Thank you for coming.
Pete, raise your hand. The event's open. It's free. Have a piece of the cake. I'd like to have the pleasure to introduce the fourth jester of VVAW, Joe Bender.
I have been given 30 seconds, and I want to salute everybody in this room who has never heard of a group called the Vietnam Veterans for the War. If you have, raise your hand. I've never met anyone like that.
Joe can be seen at Creedmoor Hospital, which is in Queens, off the Force Island Parkway. Joe?
All right. Hey!
That's a big piece of cake.
Thanks for making our wrongs the other way.
Cut this way?
Yeah.
All right.
Here you go, June. The first piece. We get the very first piece, June.